Hi, and we're so glad that you decided to take this How to Price and List Your Rental Property course with the Landlord Help Hub. We're going to walk you through some considerations that you need to take when pricing and listing your rental property.
So our goal in this course is that you can get not only maximum value for your house, but also great tenants that treat your house correctly so that you are in this landlording world for as long as you want, not getting out of it because you're forced out due to mistake or unstressful or anything. So some of our advice is to help you find the best tenants for you. And then keep in mind that these are just thoughts and advice and everything. Take our advice, keep our experience, take our thoughts, and do what's best for you. Quick example, I love pets, and Sasha typically doesn't take pets in her rentals.
It depends.
I put highly encouraged. So again, like these are just our thoughts, but my family has no allergies and hers does. So again, you want to take what works best for you from our course.
Yeah. And what works in your market. So, you may have very different markets, but there's one thing that most people in real estate can agree on, and that is location. So, when deciding what price to list your rental at, you really need to take into account the location of your property. Is it in a hot market? Is it in a slower market? Is it even whittle it down farther? Is it near a busy street? Or does it have really great commute to a likely place that a tenant might work? The location is really important when factoring how much rental income you could get each month or how much money you could ask for rent.
Okay, so another thing to keep in mind is neighborhoods. So, like in one of my areas, I've noticed that certain neighborhoods rent way quicker than others for more money, not because they're in a different school district, not because of a lot of things, but simply because they're a small area with well-known neighborhoods, so that when people are coming in, it's really easy to say, like, live in Silver Oaks or live in Clark's Crest or live or live or live. And that's in two of my smaller areas that we've done. I've seen that same thing when we were in Kingsville. They also did the same thing. So, like, if you're trying to and you're in one of those neighborhoods, that's something to keep in mind. I will say the biggest lesson that I've learned before we get into the rest of all of this is that when you're pricing, $50 can make the difference between 100 people interested and 10 people interested. And unfortunately, you can't go up, but you can go down. So if you think that you're like unsure of, you can always throw it up, try it out, see what happens, and then alter it later. Also, keep in mind though that people will see it coming down. So that's why your research is so important and paying attention.
Yeah, you don't want someone to see, like a prospective tenant to be able to see, oh, well, they have dropped the price. Maybe people are looking at the house and there's something wrong with it, when really it could just be that the landlord priced it too high to begin with,
Yep.
and there's nothing wrong with it. So just be aware of that and do your research, like Elizabeth says, before you post live.
And I will say that if I do accept the tenant's negotiation, so say I listed the price house for $2,000 and someone's like, I think it should be 18, and I'm going to accept 18, I typically will relist that property 18 before I accept the person that negotiated it, because I want everybody to be able to see that price. So I'm able to see everything that'll come in at 1800.
And I think maybe another thing to consider on top of location would be schools. So whether or not you have school age children, many people focus on, well, what school district is that in? Is it near an elementary school that is attractive to me? What programs does a high school offer? I myself I'm a homeschooler, so I have no dog in the school fight, but I still pay attention to what school district it is for any property that I purchase, because I know that's very, very important. And usually on the top of the list of most people when they're looking at different markets or different neighborhoods.
We only buy in the certain school districts, and I can tell you that 78 to 90% of all of our clients have come in because of schools. Even the house that I just rented out, it was 100% because of the schools. So we very much pay attention to that. That's not saying that you can't rent houses not in the school areas. Absolutely have done that. But keep in mind that if something is in like, great schools like 9 and something's in great schools 4, that might not be equivalent in price. Also keep in mind though that sometimes it is, but there's something to keep in mind that with all of this of what we've been saying is like it's price, but it's also how quickly something rents out, right? So if you have 6 months before you have to do it, you can play with prices. You can go high, see who you attract, see who you get it. I mean, maybe you get a dual income, no kids with a couple of dogs as their children, and you're cool with that because you have a beautiful enclosed backyard with a fence right next to, whatever is attractive. Heck, the city dog park. Who knows? But it's also important to notice that like sometimes you don't need 20 applicants, you need one great applicant to come in the door. So somebody who's getting 30 applicants, that's awesome because they get 30 people to choose from, but that also might have meant they left money on the table. Usually it means they left money on the table, and it also means that you have to deal with all of that. So you definitely want to price accordingly because $100 is $1,200. Over 3 years is $3,600. I mean, that's half a roof.
Yeah, and maybe this applies to you, or if you have the 1-bedroom condo by the beach, well, then schools might not be as important of a factor. But if you have a single family home, or how many bedrooms you have in a townhome or something like that, then schools would definitely be something that people would consider. And then speaking of bedrooms and baths, that's also really important to keep in mind. So when you are studying your market, which I do year round. I mean, I don't know if that's normal or if I just really like numbers and spreadsheets,
No,
but
I look at it every day.
so I'm always studying my rental market. I'm like, well, what is for rent now? Even though I'm not renting my house, I will look at it year round and just keep an eye for that you're looking at comparable homes, right? So like I'm not going to compare my 5-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom townhome. I'm also going to look for, like we already talked, similar location, similar school district, and those sorts of things, because sometimes the bigger house may fetch you more money and sometimes it won't. It can depend.
Well, the difference is like her 5-bedroom house right next to a 2-bedroom townhouse. Okay, cool. But if that 2-bedroom townhouse is a mile from the Pentagon versus your
Very
house,
different.
which is out like 2 hours away, it's going to be or 2 hours commute, not even 2 hours away. It's going to be very different. And so, like, keeping in mind with that, again, in my areas where the houses have the same square footages and many of the builders chose to either add a 4th room or not, I can tell you that desirability and price, usually a 3-bedroom versus a 4-bedroom was $200 difference, even with the same floor plan and the same area. So like I also watch my comps all the time because here's the thing, you don't know when you're moving. Let's be honest, whether you're military, whether you're civilian, you get the right job, you have the right family issues, a house is a 30-year commitment. I mean, our children are only 18-year commitments, let's be honest. So you always want to know what your exit plan is. Yes, you could sell it, but maybe you can't. Maybe you can rent it. You need to always look at your numbers. You need to have an idea of what things can rent for, what you're looking at. And then, the next thing we want to talk to is about garage and like space outside.
But stop there for just a second because something just came to me. You want to look at that when you're looking to rent your house, but you also want to be considering these pricing scenarios when you're purchasing
Absolutely.
a house. So it's almost like you have to think in reverse of what is this rental market? What kind of house am I looking for as either an investment or a primary home that you're going to turn into a rental? Because you don't want to purchase a home that you can't later rent out. Even if you don't plan on moving, like Elizabeth said, what if you get a job promotion and you need to move to a different state?
I mean,
You'll at least have an option of renting out your house. It's a financial decision that you can make.
Or asset.
Yeah. And it could go either way. But if you do a little bit of research on the front end of how much would this house rent for, or these houses I'm looking at to purchase, how much would they rent for? You can tailor maybe what you would spend on a house like that and then decide if it's a good purchase or not.
So I have a question for you. I know what we do. Every house before you buy it, do you price it out for rent?
Absolutely.
Do you make sure that you can rent it for more than you buy it for?
Yes, or within a thin margin.
So we personally try within about $100 to $200. So we don't need the 1%, 2%. None of those rules exist for us. That's why I'm such an advocate that like you can rent out your everyday home, whether that's your $900,000 home in SFO Bay Area or your $500 home in Hanford, California, because it's a 5-bedroom, 3-bath, like your basic everyday middle to high end homes, you can rent out easily. You can rent out almost anything based on price, location, anything rents out for a price. The question is that price worth it? But it's very important to make sure that you know what your exit plan is. We know our exit plan every time before we buy. And recently has been the first time in 13 years, almost 14 years of marriage. Oops. that we have bought like what we would want to live in. Normally we just buy great rentals.
Yeah, it's a very different mindset when you kind of flip that over and look at it from what would I rent this home that I'm going to purchase, or what would I be able to fetch in rent for this home I'm about to purchase? It almost changes what you would buy.
Yeah.
It can. Doesn't always, but it can, because it makes you think about it in an exit strategy sort of way.
Well, we had friends that were looking at a house way back when, like close to 2010. I can't remember what year, but like back in that time frame. And they were looking at this gorgeous home. I mean, it was brand new. It was gorgeous, Sasha. And I'm like, that's great. The schools are terrible. The mortgage that you would have today, yes, hindsight's 2020, but the mortgage that they would have when we were looking at it, we're like, dude, you have to appeal to like an '03 mid-level, like with children families. Now, yeah, maybe you have dual income, no kids who are willing to spend the money.
Private school, and so the school doesn't matter.
But it was more about the price, right? Like the price was like at least an '03, '04. And yes, that doesn't matter. You should not let that pricing like dictate what your house rents for. Your house rents for whatever the market is, and it doesn't matter one way or the other. But the point was, when we were telling her this, we're like, the schools are terrible, the location is terrible. Like, you're not downtown in Virginia Beach on the beach appealing to that crowd.
Yeah. It doesn't have like a niche
It
market.
doesn't have a niche market. You're not like walking distance to, Pentagon or any of that stuff. And so she ended up not doing it. And she bought like a run of the mill everyday house in a great school district like the rest of us did. And she was very happy.
Yeah.
So like definitely like keep in mind of your price, and if your price can attract those you need them to.
Yeah. Now you can talk about garages.
So the next thing that you want to think about is parking, right? So do you have a 1 car, a 2 car, or 3 car? Do you have on-site, off-site parking? Obviously, like Chicks Beach or like DC where parking's huge, that's going to matter more. I mean, in Hanford, I'll tell you that 30-car garage has gone a long way to get any rentals sometimes. And then other areas, it's been a pain because I don't have a garage. So you definitely want to know. So when we were in South Carolina and we were owning in Charleston, we had one house with a garage and one house without a garage. Do you want to bet which one rented easier than the other one?
Yeah, and some people want garages for storage. They have workshops, they have cars, they have kid toys or desert toys or whatever. So you never know what someone's lifestyle, you may want to consider that. If you live like near a lake, if you live near a lake, do you need a garage for storing some of the kayaks and canoes and stuff? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but that is definitely something to consider. And if I'm looking at 2 houses, or I'm looking at my rental property and I'm comparing it to those in the market, I want to make sure that if I have a garage, I'm comparing it to other homes that have a garage. Or how do I compare with those, or a carport, or if it's off street or on street parking? It may be a valuable thing, it may not.
Also be careful though that like you don't want to price yourself out. And let's talk about Coronado for a second, right? Like Coronado is location, 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 right? People have a budget and it's all about how close you are and if you're on island, etc. But once you make that, from what I can tell and what I've seen, like it doesn't matter how updated or how whatever, because if someone's budget is a budget. So if you are in an area where you're like right next to a metro, or you're walking distance from something like highly desirable, and you have a super updated home and there's a super non-updated home, and you're like, oh, I can get $1,000 more, but you're like, I haven't seen any other houses with 1,000. You're right. Maybe you get lucky and someone is willing to, but the reality though is like people's budget only goes so high. And a lot of times people pay more for location than update, right?
So definitely.
Right. So keep in mind also that like you have a ceiling. And so if you're seeing stuff, like things don't usually put as much value as you think on something as another thing. So keep that in mind when you're renting, because if you're like, hey, the house is sat for a month, Elizabeth, and you call me for a consultation and you're like, hey, this house is sat for a month. And I'm like, cool. Why are you so much more expensive than everybody else? Because you have granite countertops and da-da-da. And they're like, well, because I have granite countertops. And I'm like, well, a family is going to pay $500 to $800 less to be in the school district and the location than they are for like granite countertops, updated appliances.
You can you can update yourself out of a house.
Yep.
And that's something to keep in mind. that when you're doing updates, why are you doing those updates and what is it getting you? Because it's probably not getting you more rent. Like I might choose, like an example would be, I might choose to pull out carpet from a portion of my main floor, right? And replace it with some other type of hard flooring, like wood flooring. Sure, that's more expensive. I certainly don't think I'm getting more rent for that. What I think I'm getting for that update is I'm not having to worry about wear and tear on carpet. I can resurface wood floors and replenish them back to new for fairly cheap, like cheaper than I could carpet for the space that I'm talking about.
Well,
That might be why I do that upgrade, but it is not because I think I'm going to get more rent.
and also keep in mind, sometimes those updates are actually like negatives. Like we put tile in a whole house in Central California, Hanford. And it was actually a negative to our coming in that there was no carpet in the bedrooms, even though it doesn't get below like 33 degrees. Never had freezing really out there because they didn't like that. They wanted carpet in the bedrooms. And I'm like, dude, you can throw down carpet on. So keep in mind that just because you did it for your desires doesn't mean someone else is going to value it too. It doesn't mean they're not going to take your house, because if it's the only house in that neighborhood and has the value, like
They just may
desirability,
not value it as much as you do.
to pay more rent.
To pay more rent. Yeah, it may not warrant the money that you think it will warrant. So when you're thinking of how to price your house, you have to factor those in. And that marble countertop that you have may be precious to you, but might not fetch you more rent.
And another thing to keep in mind with like all of this is time of year and like what you have as assets, right? So in Hanford, it gets up to 117 degrees in the summer. And is it hot? But I have had houses with pools. And let me tell you that like in January, nobody appreciates that pool. So you're not getting $200 more for it, even though you should. You really should. Come July, you can get almost $700 for it. I'm being a little facetious, but not by a lot. So like also understand like the time of year and like what's going on. When people are like sweating through their shirts to see houses, that pool looks super awesome. When it is 32 degrees out and they're bundled up in like their furry coats that you're like in Central California,
they don't see
they don't
themselves
see
in your
them.
pool.
Right. So understand like your time of year, and that's why time of year is so important if you can choose to list your house. I had a house that I listed August 12th, which our schools went back the 15th. It was gone. I had a friend's house that I helped him list because they deployed September 2nd. It sat for 2 months. So like if you can understand when the schools happen and when they move out, and like I tried. He was a single dude. I told him to come take my house. He didn't believe me. He believed me later. So like going back to like my point of it is if you can make sure you follow these trends, it really makes a difference in renting out your house.
Yeah, and sticking with establishing the price of your home. Sometimes there's markets that are hot all year round. It doesn't matter. There's some that are very seasonal. Like if you don't rent your house by, a certain time, it's going to sit empty for months. So it's good to know that when you're establishing your price and how close you are to that like cutoff for your market would adjust how much you might price it
And
to attract people.
Let's talk about sitting empty for months, right?
Oh,
So here's the thing. Anything will rent for any price. It's up to you at what that price is. Let's just go for easy numbers, $2,400, right? So if you have, let's do 1,200 for really easy numbers, right? 1,200 is $100 a month, right? So every month that your house sits empty, you could have subtracted $100 off and then not had to pay that mortgage for that month. So if you are having trouble renting your house, do yourself a favor and cut those rent numbers, because that'll save you later. Because the reality is anything will rent for a price. So if it's not renting, I start cutting it by like $50. And then I cut it again, and then I cut it again, and then I cut it again. And yes, it is not a lot of fun, but that's what renewal time is. As long as you're not in a rent controlled area, you can just increase the price at renewal when it's back to normal.
Yeah.
And I've had houses, which I had two side by side. One rented like before I even could hit Zillow. I just posted on a Facebook ad and like Facebook group, and it was gone. And the other one, I had to lower $300 to get it rented at the same time. Like it just didn't rent. The next year, I was able to bring it back up to market, and by the time the tenants left, they started at 1,900 and went up to 25 over 4 years. So you're not stuck at the price unless you sign a multi-year contract,
Mhm.
but don't let it sit empty.
Yeah, because what you have to reduce your price by to get it rented, you have to factor how long it will take you to make that amount of money back, and it's hardly ever a good situation to be in.
Well, and plus, a lot of insurances after 30 days empty, unless
Yep.
you're on a special plan, you violate the insurance.
Yeah.
So if your house like has a water leak or whatever, you're no longer covered. So it's really important to keep in mind, like pricing your house is right. And just, I know when you get 20 people interested in your house, you're like, oh, I could have made it higher. Well, you're like, maybe, but maybe this also means you find a great tenant. So it's very important that to really screen to find a good tenant because someone that does $2,400 a month in damage is $200 less. So like, was that worth it? Because remember, this isn't your day job. This is your future. Like we're building future wealth and future goals. And if you get kicked out of landlording because this is a terrible experience,
Yeah.
what was the point?
Yeah. So another huge, Elizabeth already touched on it, factor in pricing could be, do you or do you not allow pets?
I allow pets. Pets help me get the best tenants. Pets also, I get more money because there's less rentals. So, for example, right now in my market, there is 24 4-bedroom houses available, one except pets. That's it. There's nobody else. So, and that was me. So we have found that we've had a lot of luck with pets because there's so few people that do it. The reality is even when there's a lot of people and a lot of houses, you still have very little competition. We also allow cats. I do have two, so I'm a little biased. You do need to watch your insurance to see if there's any like animal restrictions, and then you also need to check and see if like your county has any restrictions. For example, I believe, don't quote me, but I remember me listening in an investor that like Prince George's doesn't allow pit bulls.
Oh, okay.
So like you definitely want to check all of these areas to see if there's any rules before you accept it. Like same thing with HOAs.
Mhm.
And also check and see what your HOA rules are for renting it out. Like we're working on a house now and we have to submit the lease to the HOA.
Yeah. And your insurance, certain breeds may be a restriction on insurance.
Yep.
I've seen that before, which doesn't preclude you from allowing pets, but you would need to be upfront with your tenants if they happen to have a pet that might be on a restricted list. I do allow pets in all of my rentals, but it's usually very cautiously would probably be the word. And I have, Eliz, we'll talk about how to write a lease later, but my lease is pretty locked on for pets and deposits and damage and things like that. And cleaning, probably like most people, but this is about pricing your rental. So sometimes allowing pets allows people to be interested in your property and can help dictate how you might price your property. So you kind of touched on only home in the market. Like you were the only home that offered pets. So that gave you a leg up regardless of, or maybe even helped you how to price.
So let's talk about where do you list your house? For us, we truly enjoy, both of us, and truly enjoy Zillow. I know other markets like Facebook Marketplace. I have not done that. I do not find it adds value in my markets. I will say though that when you're learning about what works best for you, I highly recommend you go everywhere. Like we would do military by owner back when AHRN was AHRN. We did renters.com. We did them all until we figured out like what was the best for our market. So if you're a first time landlord, go everywhere and then see what works. Do that a couple times and then you're like, cool, this works. Then just go to that. But in the beginning, more is better than less.
Yeah, and I think that there's also, in addition to like Facebook Marketplace, oftentimes if you're in a community group, sometimes if you're allowed to put ads or solicitation on those groups, sometimes just letting your neighbors know that your house is becoming available for rent is a way of, I guess, letting your neighbors know that their neighbor is moving, but also they may have a friend who's moving to the area or know someone who knows someone. And then it's kind of nice, when it's almost a referral of a tenant in sort.
Just make sure that you still get market rent.
Oh, yeah,
Sometimes
definitely.
I find that when things don't hit the market, that people try to like negotiate low. So if you think your gut is 3,500 and they're like only 29, dude, you know what? Let it hit the market and see what you
Yeah.
get. So I've noticed that in some areas from like listening to friends that I've helped and other clients and,
Yeah.
and stuff, that like you see it a lot in like DC when it's so competitive.
Yeah.
If people hear that you're moving, they do it, but like then I hear like people got like talked down, and I'm like, you're literally in the hottest neighborhood. So if people are coming after you, that probably means you have a pretty decent house and a good listing. Make sure you get your numbers, because here's the thing. If the roof breaks, it's your problem. You need to have money for it. So like don't rent out for anything less than what the house is market and value. Now, if you listen to our tax course,
Mhm.
do you want to talk about that?
Oh, yeah. If you go to the tax preparation for landlords course, Jerry talks about fair market rent, meaning there is actual IRS, I guess, repercussions. Sounds strong, but I think that's the right word for not listing your home at fair market rental value. So if you think you're doing a favor by giving someone or a family member or a
So
friend
why would you
discounted
break
rent,
this
I
for somebody
wouldn't.
else?
I wouldn't, because I guess I wouldn't want to lose the money. Maybe I'm not a nice person.
Well, but here's the other thing, is like I have done favors, and the reality is nobody remembers those favors when they're cold. Nobody remembers those favors when you have to like paint the outside of the house and they're inconvenience. Nobody remembers that when your roof needs to be redone. Like nobody remembers all of this. No one wants to put a bucket and like go like resod or fix something up for you really quick to save you money. They're gonna make you call the handyman. The handyman's gonna cost you $150 an hour for a freaking like easy thing, and
You have to
that's that.
consider that when you're
So
pricing.
consider all of this. You need to rent your house for top market, not over the market that you have to lower it or whatever. But you want to rent it
A
for
fair
market,
amount.
for fair market value,
Mhm.
so that you have the money in your kitty to fix things.
Yeah, and then the truth is if that family member or that friend of a friend really wants to live in your place, then and you stick to your guns for what you think is your fair market rent, they will eventually live there because they'll go out in town and they'll see your competition and they'll know that you have priced it fairly, and then they'll still want to rent your place without you having to compromise your financial situation for
Or
them.
if they don't, do you really want them as tenants?
Yeah.
I mean, like you paid a fair value for your house
When you buy it,
when
yeah.
you bought it. You should get a fair value from your person.
I think too, once you have that price set, and then now we're talking about where to list your house, Zillow is good. Zestimates are sometimes a little hit or
Oh,
miss,
please.
but that's why it's best, like we're suggesting, to actually study live rentals throughout the season. And, you might want to consider specialized listings, like whether you are an active duty military person or a civilian, if you live near a base or a military installation, you may want to post on a more niche site like military by owner. If you're considering if you want to sell or rent your house, we were talking earlier about military by owner, you could list it for sale or rent and see what pans out for you.
Well, and it's also a great place that like if you're playing with like numbers and values, you can throw it up on there before Zillow sees it and keeps it. Because remember, Zillow on the bottom writes down the numbers of like 19, like they now record the rent values the same that they do the sales values. So that's a great thing. And then also, if you're doing the rent or sell, whichever's first, keep in mind that Zillow only does one. So you can use military by owner for the other one to see what you want to do.
And it really feeds like a niche market. So if you happen to have a rental in an area where there's a military installation, it could be very helpful. Like people will know to go look there.
Yep.
So listing. There are lots of places to list. I agree with you. When you're new, list them as many places as you can and see what works best for you.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about my favorite thing, professional photography. If you follow me on Reluctant Landlord, you'll know that I love posting the fun listings that I have found lately. Oh my gosh. Here's the thing. Do you want top market? Pay the $200 for a photographer. I paid $200 or $300. I think it might have gone up slightly depending on the market. I don't think I paid more than $300. That's like $30 a month. Like, I promise you, you get more than that. You can keep them forever. Sasha has great advice of getting it before you move in, because then you can do it, but like keep them. Like they're great photos. I got them last year thinking we were gonna move when we didn't move, and then I had them for this year. They're cheap, they're awesome. Keep them. Trust me, your cell phone does not do
Doesn't do it justice. And you have to think like your photos may look great to you, but the people who are looking at all the ads are scrolling through, multiple ads, and you want your ad to stand out. So you want it to stand out for a good reason, not a bad reason. And it doesn't matter, I would say, backing up one step for your, where to list and your listing, whether you do your own photos or professional photos, you need to prepare your house to be rented, right?
Oh, your favorite comment. Okay, let's talk about that laundry basket.
All right. So everything has a place, right? In my house, sometimes the laundry basket of clothes that need to be folded belong on the couch. That might be where it actually belongs, but not when I'm taking photos of my rental properties. So make sure that you can tuck away that laundry basket, even if it's behind you. Take the picture or have the professional come take the picture. But you need to make sure that whether you're doing professional photographs or your own photos, that you've properly prepared your space. If that might mean decluttering certain things, and by decluttering, you can, remove all of the bathroom items off your vanity and tuck them away under the sink, take the pictures or have the photographer come take the pictures, pull that stuff right back out and put it up. It doesn't mean you need to clean or remove it forever. It just needs to be behind the camera.
I mean, do you think this is really this clean?
No.
I'll leave it at that. Like, come on. Our background looks awesome, right? I won't show you the rest, so she forgives me later for even mentioning this on camera. But my point is, you don't have to see it. Fake it till you make it. A picture says 1,000 words. What words do you want to see?
Yeah.
We totally forgot to talk about my bane of my existence. What you include in price. Let's talk about prices.
So let's go back to price.
Let's go back to price.
Let's go back to price.
So this summer, I had a client that I was working with to help him. We decided not to rent it out anymore for our short-term rental business. And so as part of that, since we were the tenant, we were assisting in renting it out, right? So his price, and he didn't believe me. So if you're watching this, I told you so. So his price was $3,000 and he was getting nobody, right? And I don't care what you say. If the listing goes up, Zillow says you have 10, the listing has 10 contacts and it comes down 3 days later, it rented. It rented in 3 days. The houses were exactly the same like general, like top 3 neighborhoods, same school districts. They both had a pool. One was renting for 28 and one was renting for 3. Guess which one took 7 weeks and guess which one took 3 days. Okay, but let's talk about like what he wasn't including and which was driving me nuts when he was struggling. So his $3,000, he included a washer and dryer. He included pest control. He included landscaping. He included a pool service. And I think he even tried to do like a ring camera or something. I can't remember on that. My point is the cost, I added them all up for him as part of the point. He was over $350. So he was paying $350 more than this other client. So remember, $200, $350. So $150 less than this client because they included none of it and had a lower price. I'm a huge believer that you don't include any of that stuff in your lease unless you have to for your area. So like in our area, a lot of civilians don't include refrigerators because in California, that's typical. You bring your own refrigerator. It's a huge transient, like federal area correctionals office, or like military, like a lot of transient people. So if you had a refrigerator in your house, you could get like $200 more. So like that's where I say include the darn refrigerator. But when it came to the other stuff, like my lease requires you to have the landscaping done in a professional manner. And then I tell them my landscaper and then what he charges. And when they find out that like landscaping in California is $150, they all hire my landscaper.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm like, you are responsible for all pool maintenance. If something happens to it, it's on you. Suddenly, they all use my pool guys usually. The reality is they will use your people. Same thing when I explain that we are in a Black Widow area. And if you don't want to see the Black Widows, I highly recommend the pest control. But it's their choices, right? And they can choose whether or not to do it. And in the lease, the other thing was whenever I found that I did it, then it became like if the guys didn't do the work or the tenants didn't let it, you were in the middle. So not only are you paying more money, you can't even guarantee the service because if
Having
you
to be a liaison.
because you have to be a liaison, but if something goes wrong, you contracted it. So you can't blame it on the tenant because it's your responsibility, but you're 3,000 miles away and have no idea if they're going to show up or not.
Yeah.
So I don't include any extras.
I include some extras. And then I think we'd probably need to mention, like some of my properties have washers and dryers. It's pretty accepted that my rentals will have washer and dryers, but I include those as is, meaning as is, like, don't call me if it breaks, or I guess call and let me know that it breaks. But if you want to fix it, the tenant is responsible for calling the repairman and or getting their own washer and dryer if that one that was provided stops working for whatever reason, which that actually has happened before. So it allows them to start with maybe an amenity that they want. And I would say out of over a decade of doing it, I've had an as is appliance stop working once. So in general, in my markets, like a washer and dryer is always included, but as is.
I've done that. It's a pain in my tush because I've had way more than one time. So I have just either like included it or not included. Usually when it ends up getting included, it's because I forgot to say it's not included in the ad and I get cold on it.
Yeah. For me, I just don't want to move them.
Well, for me, the problem is then we get into the discussion of like, well, I fixed it, so it's mine, or like, okay, I don't want them, so where do I store them? Or like, you need to come get rid of it. It just, so like for me, my long term, I also do short terms. So my long terms need to be low stress, low, like no problems. So we try really hard, which we'll get into general the leases on like keeping it simple. The kids principle is my life. I also have 3, 5 and under, so if it's not simple, it doesn't survive.
It doesn't happen. So we went back to pricing for a little bit, but we'll fast forward back to where to list. And we were talking about photography and whether you should do your own photography or have a professional photographer. I think that you should have a professional photographer, and I think we both agree on that, especially if your budget allows for it, because I think that it will help you get tenants, and that's the goal. I also think that whether you go professional or you private or you do your own photography, you still have to do the same steps to prepare for that. Like as far as decluttering, working on your curb appeal, making sure that in your listing, you use the right, featured image. You don't want to, a featured image of the couch in your living room because no one cares about the couch in your living room. So a nice photo of the front of your house, like unobstructed from fences and shrubbery, but just nice, clean photos. And you don't need 5 million of them. Definitely no one needs to see, like every angle of your back porch or what.
And keep in mind, I will say the only time that I recommend not using your front porch if there's something really cool about your neighborhood. So a lot of times my Hanford houses will do the pool. Like you were showing me that really cool house that you were looking at, and you showed me a picture of like the tennis courts and like all of the assets that you saw, and that was really cool. So I would say if there is something, I was looking at a short-term listing and it was a little off topic, but the community had an amazing water park, right? Like that is what set the community apart. And so instead of doing the run of the mill, what everybody else had, it had a picture of the water park. I mean, that is honestly why I ended up taking the house, because it was the only one that showed me that they were in the water park community. So if there's something really cool, like you have a fenced in backyard when nobody has fenced in backyards, you have parking when nobody has parking.
Because people will generally know the area that they're searching in. So they'll generally know the style of house that's in that area. So if you do have something that really stands out as, oh, well, I didn't realize that was there. And then they don't have to read down to the bottom of your description to find out, oh, it's in the water park,
Well, yeah. So for example, in Pax River, Wildwood has this amazing clubhouse, like HOA, and most people don't know about it. I didn't. So like while I knew Pax and understood it, I had no idea that they had, I mean, they literally have like a kid's playground and what, I mean, like it looks like it should be out of like a freaking hip hotel. I wish more people had put that in the listing, because like they're all 5-bedroom, 3-bath, or 2-bed or whatever it is.
What makes the listing
but
stand
that
out.
was really cool. So if you have something, that's where I recommend you putting that first. Even if you think people are knowing, understand your demographic. Are your demographics local or your demographics like out of town? That's why, like, I've noticed in these smaller communities, like certain neighborhoods get named and go quicker just because when people are coming, especially if it's like an exchange to give a lot of Aussies or whatever, they'll pick neighborhoods. Like, look
Yeah.
at this neighborhood, this neighborhood, this neighborhood, because it's easier than trying to draw boundaries or whatever. So if you're in one of those, also maybe put that in your listing. Again, your goal is to set yourself apart from the 30 other listings that
Scrolling.
are right down.
Yeah, the scrolling. And then not only is it important to have good photos of your property with the, good featured photo that is descriptive of your property, but you also have a written description. So what I say with this is a couple of things, but one is less is sometimes more.
Mhm.
I'm a real bottom line up front. Like if you can say it in bullet points instead of paragraphs, my eye will be drawn to that, but you want to give enough information, right?
So I use ChatGPT. I write my listing. If you've ever seen my texting or writing ability, you understand this is a huge asset. So like you want it professional. And everybody will say she used to be my editor when I'd have to like keep it professional. And now I use ChatGPT. So I don't tell it to write me a listing. I put it all in bullets and then I say like put this in listing form and then I use that. I have found that to be a huge asset and it takes this from being a huge pain to like a 30-minute exercise. So like write all your bullet points and keep in mind, safe, quiet.
Yeah.
All of these like legal buzzwords that could get you in trouble when like the dog won't incessantly stop like barking that didn't exist before you did it. When
But you
like
told me it was a quiet neighborhood.
I will tell you that the neighborhood that had the most issues have been in the best areas. So like I just don't use those words. I say gorgeous.
Yeah, nicely maintained.
Oh, I'm careful of the word maintained because when my house leaks.
Oh, well, I'm at the area, but anyway.
Because you know what? You're gonna go. Here's the other thing that let's talk about really quick. It's kind of not here, but it kind of is here. Your house is gonna have issues no matter like how good. I remember we had a house, it was like awesome, 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 and then it just had a year of fun. Like everything broke. If it could break, it broke plus twice. It was great. So like you want to just keep things very like the granite, the floors,
Matter of
stainless
fact.
steel, matter of fact. So when things go wrong, they can't bring up your listing.
My favorite, and I don't know that we've ever talked about this, but sometimes I read ads and they will list what the general amount of utilities are. And I always
Ooh.
think that's not a safe bet
Mhm.
because what I keep my temperature at to maintain my utilities may be quite different from what someone else keeps their utilities at. But that's a question that I'm shocked when I see that in a listing description. And I'm shocked when, if a prospective tenant asks me that question, I'm
So
always really careful to caveat it with,
I always get the question, especially in Hanford where utilities are really high. So if I give the information, I always say, like, this is based on my family, my preference. We can make no guarantees. I have known that people like it. For example, when we were renting out our big house recently, somebody was on a special kind of oil, can't remember what kind, that they heated the house. We were on propane. And so there was a discussion because she was like, my bill is like $1,500 a month. And it's like we pulled all of our bills and we were like, this is for our family, our needs. We can give you an idea, but we hold no responsibility. I mean, I had a whole like caveat. So if you give out that information, be very careful because remember, no one is going to be the same as you. And you don't want someone to come back and say, let's negotiate because it's off by $10.
yeah. You just want to, put your best foot forward. Like I might say something instead of listing utilities, tell them that, it has a gas water heater or a gas furnace or an electric furnace or an electric, that might allow them to like figure out what that pricing might equate to for their
And
family.
ask them to come back and ask you. Like when they personally ask you, you can always give that information.
And we say for everything
with
in
the
your
caveat.
description.
Yeah. Like even pets, I say like pets are welcome with landlord's permission.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think in the description too, it's also important, especially in your first listing, is if someone has more questions, like I've had people ask me, oh, can you take one more picture of that stairway? I'm happy to,
Mhm.
so you don't have to consider every single scenario. You want to consider enough in your listing that it attracts people or that draws people to your property. And maybe that is that they have a question or additional question
Mhm.
about it. Or maybe, in this day and age, they want to FaceTime around the house or Zoom or something like that. And depending on if it's vacant or if it's occupied, that may or may not be a possibility.
Well,
But
and remember, like, usually your tenants are pretty awesome. I know ours has. So, like, you're like, well, Elizabeth, if I have to get that one more staircase that, like, Sasha mentioned, like, I'm SOL. I'm like, well, my tenants have been kind enough to take the picture. So that's why, like, when you're doing all of this, you want to rent it at a price so you can set the expectations. Don't take pictures. Like, if your house is in its 1950s glory, please don't make it look like it's in its
oh yeah.
220s. Like, you want the house to look nice, but you want the house to represent what it truly is. So you set the
Realistic.
realistic expectations.
Yeah, show it as it is. That way, if people show up, they are already expecting what they're going to see because you've been great in your photos, you've been great in your description.
Because no one likes surprises. Excuse me. No one likes less than they value surprises. So, like, if they're pleasantly surprised because you're like, oh, it's a 1950s glory, and they're like, dude, are you kidding me? That shag carpet is like great on my feet. Like, how did you not love it? Then, like, that's great, right? But no one wants to walk in and be like, oh my goodness, this is an Elvis house, and I am not interested in that. That was only at like his house and I walk through it as a museum. Like, this is not a museum. You know what I mean? So, like, be realistic. So, like, you don't want to go through 100 people because you're wrong and they walk right back out.
Well, and it wastes your time because then you misrepresent your house either in the photos or the description of your listing. It not only is wasting the prospective tenant's time, but it's wasting yours because then you're having to field extra calls. You're showing the house to people who wouldn't be interested in it if they knew the reality. And I mean, to be honest, in this day and age, we all know when trick photography is being used. So if you're trying to use like a widening lens to make a room look better or bigger, we see it. And so then that makes it, to me at least, that is like off-putting, like, well, then what are they trying to hide?
Yep.
When it could be nothing. It could just be that, you thought that would be a great idea to showcase your room in like a panoramic form or something like that. But people generally want to just see it for what it is and imagine their family living there and imagine their stuff there, and they'll reach out to you if they have more questions. So what is it about pricing homes or listing your rentals that you have struggled with or that you've had successes with? We'd love for you to reach out on Facebook or Instagram or our YouTube channel and let us know those things. Definitely be a part of our community and ask your questions, because if you have that question, definitely other people have that question, whatever it is. So we like to say it's good to talk about these things out loud because we all learn that way.
Yep. Well, we look to see you for the next one, and we're about to start the next course. So come join us.